everybody, I wanted to do something a little bit different today. If you haven't heard, Jon Schnepp from Collider Movie Talk and AMC Movie Talk before that passed away. News came out about a week ago that he was in serious condition, and then they released earlier this week that he'd had a stroke, and then he passed away eventually this week. And that's hitting me pretty hard. As part of kind of this movie talk kind of community, as a mutant lover of movies, I mean, he was a staple of geek culture, and one of these people that I've watched so much movie talk, Collider Heroes. He did a documentary called The Death of Superman Lives, What Happened. I was a first kind of Kickstarter on it. And so this one kind of hits hard when celebrities, every year, different people die, and it's always tragic. But there's those people that hit you extra hard, and this is one of those ones for me. So I just kind of wanted to stop and reflect a little bit on my experience of watching him, and kind of, I don't really have a plan for this. I just kind of hit record and, wanted to process it. And, if you're someone else that was kind of hit pretty heavily by this, you can process along with it. So I'll just kind of tell you my story of following along with him and how that kind of played out. So for me, I started watching John Campia's stuff, I don't know, back 7 years ago or something, before it was Movie Talk. Before it was even associated with AMC, he had something called For Your Consideration that was like a once-a-month podcast that he put the videos up on the internet. So I started watching that, and then he did a daily version of it for a little while, then it stopped doing it altogether, and then it came back and it was on AMC. And so I started watching that from the very beginning, and it quickly transitions to its name of AMC Movie Talk. Then in 2012, they announced that they were going to do this movie called Guardians of the Galaxy at Comic-Con. And John Campia didn't know much of anything about Guardians of the Galaxy because it's, in the scheme of comic book type things, it's not the A-list. Now everyone knows what Guardians is because of the movie, but at the time people didn't know what it was. So he tried to track someone down to come on to Movie Talk that knew about the comic book Guardians of the Galaxy that could talk about it. And he tracked down Jon Schnepp and brought him on the show. And they didn't really know each other before that. There's just mutual people kind of, here's this guy I know that loves comic books. He comes on the show and had kind of great chemistry with John and everything, so became a regular of Movie Talk. And that's where kind of him joining into this kind of movie punditry space, that's where that came from. And so that's where I was first introduced to him. And quickly through that process, I found out that he also worked on a show called Metalocalypse from, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago or something like that. Very weird, heavy metal, horror, violent comedy cartoon on Cartoon Network, I believe. And I'd watched some of that with some of my friends. I wasn't like a massive fan, but it's one of those shows that if you've watched a few episodes of it, you remember it. So I have these distinct memories of watching it with my buddy in his apartment. Like, what is this insane show? And we watched a bunch of episodes. And even though I only really watched it with this friend of mine, I mean, it's so memorable. And I think he directed the entire first season or something like that. So every episode of the show I've seen, he had directed. I was like, wow, this guy's got an insane, wacky sense of humor. And then, that's kind of his personality on the show, this nerdy, geeky guy with a crazy sense of humor. And around the same time, he announced that he was going to start doing a documentary about the 1990s Tim Burton Superman movie that was going to star Nicolas Cage that we'd all heard rumors about. And back in the 90s, I remember Nicolas Cage being on like Jay Leno and David Letterman and saying, oh yeah, well next summer we're going to do Superman. And then it never happened. And it was early days of the internet, so you didn't have all the way now we have a lot more information when projects like that fall through. So it's just like this weird thing of like, we knew that they were going to do it. Like Nicolas Cage said it, Tim Burton said it, and then it was just gone. And about 10 years ago, the internet started to circulate these pictures of Nicolas Cage and these suits and stuff, and all was like kind of crazy, but we never heard the full story. And so then Jon Schnepp said, I'm going to make a documentary about this. And so for me, I was like, I would love to see, I love that stuff. I love the story behind movies that kind of fell apart. So he put out a Kickstarter to fund it, and I was in his first round of kickstarting it. I was one of the people that kind of threw in money, like, I would love to see this. And it's like, I think it's the only Kickstarter I've actually ever sent money to was his for The Death of Superman Lives. And so I'm pretty sure my name is actually in the credits of it because of my support on it. So, and it turned into this long project that took years and years and years for the movie to get made. And all that time he was on Movie Talk. And I, at that point in time in my life, I watched Movie Talk every single day, or did listen to the podcast, and followed very closely along with all of it. And so I just literally, I don't know, maybe hundreds of hours or 100 hours watching Jon Schnepp talk about movies. And eventually he finished Death of Superman Lives, and he did a premiere here in Austin, where I live. There was the LA premiere, and then there was the Austin premiere, and I went to the showing for the Austin premiere and met him at the showing of it, because he's just in the lobby. It was just a movie theater, and it wasn't a bunch of rah-rah or anything like that. So I showed up, and he was kind of at the table, just kind of walk up to him, hey man, I was a Kickstarter here, and he's just dead tired, because, I mean, this isn't like super $1 million production to get this movie done. This is just a guy that works out in Hollywood and very normal in the one sense, while being famous in geek culture in other sense. And so he's worked very hard to get the movie done, and basically had to re-edit the entire movie a month before it came out, because he landed one of the most important interviews for the entire thing with this guy named Jon Peters. And the final product of the documentary is basically built around the Jon Peters interview, because he was the producer on it. He was kind of a weird guy, and everyone has these different takes on Jon Peters and everything. And so then Jon Schnepp had to re-edit the movie 1 month before it came out, because he got such an important interview. And it's great. If you've seen the documentary, it's absolutely needed. What he did was a great decision. So I met him, and he's just tired, because he did the LA premiere a day or two before, and then he was doing 2 showings in a row in Austin. I think I was at the second showing, so he's just dead tired. But I mean, he's like, hey, thanks, man. It was kind of real soft-spoken, and when I said that I was a crowdfunder, he pulled out and gave me a patch for Death of Superman Lives and everything like that. And then I went in to sit down, watch the documentary, and afterwards he did a Q&A. And then it ended, and I didn't get snap a selfie with him or anything when I first talked to him, which I probably should have done. And so then after the movie, I did the creepy version of a selfie, where he was kind of standing behind me, and I was like, hey buddy, can you take my picture real quick? And so he takes my picture with Jon Schnepp right behind me. And then, if you know what the website, ain'titcoolnews.com, Harry Knowles is the guy that started it and ran it. So he was right there in the whole, on the other side of the camera when all this was taking place and everything. So interesting little moment of kind of geek culture people being around me. And so that's kind of my Jon Schnepp story. And so this one's kind of, it's one of those things where you just start to realize how fragile life is. We operate from the assumption that all of us have infinity time and that we're going to be here forever. We just assume that, even though we know otherwise. And so we even doubly assume it about famous people than people that, that everything will just be fine and dandy for them. And then so when these moments happen that, even though, I talked with him for a minute or something like that. This isn't a guy that I had, we're not buddies. Literally, I talked to him for a minute. And it kind of reminds us of our own mortality and the fragility of life and things like that. And so anyway, I just kind of wanted to hit record and tell my little stories about Jon Schnepp. And I always, had a lot of fun watching him on all the shows, and in all the years of watching Movie Talk, almost everyone on those shows kind of at some point in time drove me nuts or made me mad. But Jon Schnepp never really did, because he was always so Jon Schnepp-esque and didn't get into the weird stuff that kind of drove me crazy about some of the other people. And so, yeah, man, it's hard. You never know which ones are going to hit you. And just so out of the blue, 50 years old, 50, 51, something like that, just way too young to die, just out of the blue like this, just shocking, tragic. And so anyway, like I said, I just wanted to share my thoughts. I didn't have a plan on any of this. If you guys want to talk Jon Schnepp down below, this is the place to do it. And be respectful down below in the comment section. I'm not going to be very patient if you should talk about this movie. This is not the right place to ask me to recommend that I do videos or things like that. Let's keep this one focused on Jon Schnepp. Thank you guys for watching, and play your respects down below.